What if I told you that in one of the world's wealthiest cities, a teenage girl made a decision that would destroy everything her family had built over generations? A decision so shocking that authorities tried to bury the story completely. Have you ever felt so trapped by your family's expectations that you thought there was no way out? Have you ever wondered what happens when cultural traditions clash with a young person's desperate need for freedom? Well, today's story will show you exactly where that collision can lead, and trust me, you're not prepared for what actually happened. If you think family drama is complicated in your household, wait until you hear about Sheikh Rashid Al Mansour and his 17-year-old daughter Liana. Because what started as a father discovering his daughter's secret relationship ended with one of them dead and the other vanishing into Dubai's shadowy detention system. Before we dive deep into this chilling tale, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Why? Because stories like this, the ones that powerful people don't want you to know, are exactly what this channel is built for. And if you're someone who walks away from difficult truths, if you're someone who prefers comfortable lies over harsh realities, then maybe this isn't the channel for you. But if you're still here, if you're ready to confront what really happens behind closed doors in the world's most exclusive neighborhoods, then we're about to take a journey together. This isn't just another true crime story. This is a masterclass in how secrets can become weapons, how control can breed murder, and how even the most powerful men in the world can be brought down by the very people they think they control. In the next few minutes, you'll discover how a single conversation between a father and daughter escalated into violence so brutal that it sent shockwaves through Dubai's elite circles. You'll learn why this case was hushed up so quickly that most people have never heard of it. And most importantly, you'll understand the warning signs that could prevent this kind of tragedy from happening in families around the world. Are you ready? Because once you hear Liana's story, you'll never look at family control the same way again. Dubai, where money flows like water and power is measured in the height of your glass towers. Sheikh Rashid Al Mansour wasn't a ruler of Dubai, but he might as well have been royalty. At 52, he controlled a business empire worth hundreds of millions. His mansion near Jumeirah was the kind of place that made millionaires feel poor. Exotic cars lined his driveway like a luxury showroom. Private jets waited for him at Dubai International Airport. When Sheikh Rashid spoke, people listened. But here's what the business magazines never wrote about him: Rashid was a man obsessed with honor. Not just personal honor, family honor. The kind of honor that demanded his children, especially his daughters, live according to rules that hadn't changed in centuries. While his sons were sent to elite universities in London and New York, his daughters remained home. Controlled. Watched. Protected, he called it. Imprisoned, they might have said, if they'd been allowed to speak freely. This wasn't unusual in certain circles of Dubai's elite. Traditional values mixed with modern wealth created households that looked like palaces but felt like prisons. And Rashid's mansion? It was the perfect example. Security cameras monitored every corner. Staff reported directly to him about his children's activities. His daughters' phones were regularly checked. Their internet access was limited and monitored. Even their friendships required his approval. From the outside, it looked like a loving father protecting his children from Dubai's fast-paced, sometimes dangerous social scene. From the inside, it felt like suffocation. Rashid justified everything through the lens of family reputation. Our name means something, he would tell his children. When people hear Al Mansour, they think of respect, tradition, honor. I will not let anyone destroy what generations of our family have built. He had 5 children total. 4 seemed to accept their father's world without question. They understood the rules, followed them, and found their happiness within the boundaries he set. But his youngest daughter, Liana, was different. At 17, Liana was considered one of the most beautiful girls in their social circle. Quiet, observant, seemingly obedient, she appeared to be the perfect daughter. When guests visited the Al Mansour mansion, they often commented on how well-behaved and respectful she was. What they didn't know was that Liana had learned something her father never expected: how to hide in plain sight. And if you think you know where this story is going, let me ask you this: when was the last time you hit that like button? Because what you're about to hear next will completely change how you think about the teenagers in your own life. While her sisters accepted their golden cage, Liana Al-Mansour was quietly planning her escape. It started innocently enough. At 15, she discovered she could access unrestricted internet through an old tablet hidden in the household storage room. What began as curiosity about the world beyond her father's walls quickly became an addiction to freedom. Think about your own teenage years for a moment. Remember that feeling of wanting to make your own choices, to be seen as an individual rather than just someone's daughter or son? Now multiply that feeling by 1,000, add the weight of cultural expectations, and you'll begin to understand what Liana was experiencing. Through online forums and social media apps her father had never heard of, Liana connected with other young people living in Dubai. Expatriate teenagers, local students, even young activists who shared stories about breaking free from controlling families. For the first time in her life, Liana felt like she belonged somewhere, but belonging online wasn't enough. At 16, she met someone who would change everything: Karim, an 18-year-old Syrian refugee studying at the American University of Dubai. Their relationship began through late-night messages, shared dreams of freedom, and complaints about families that didn't understand them. Within months, they were meeting in secret, carefully planned encounters that required Liana to bribe household staff and lie about school activities. Do you know someone who's ever been in a forbidden relationship? Have you ever had to sneak around to be with someone your family disapproved of? Then you understand the rush Liana felt every time she successfully met Karim without her father knowing. But this wasn't just teenage rebellion. For Liana, Karim represented everything her future could be if she could just escape her father's control. He talked about traveling the world, about women having careers, about choosing your own path in life. Things that sounded impossible in the Al-Mansour mansion but felt achievable when she was with him. Their relationship deepened quickly. Late-night phone calls led to secret meetings. Secret meetings led to physical intimacy. And physical intimacy led to explicit messages and photos that Liana thought were safely hidden in encrypted apps. She was wrong. By early 2019, Liana and Karim were making concrete plans. They talked about her leaving Dubai, about starting a new life together, about her finally being free to make her own choices. These weren't teenage fantasies. They were researching visa requirements, looking at universities in other countries, even discussing how she could access money her father had set aside for her education. What Liana didn't realize was that in households like hers, no secret stays hidden forever. No matter how careful you think you're being, no matter how many precautions you take, the truth has a way of surfacing. And here's what I need you to understand before we continue: if you're not subscribing to this channel, if you're not engaging with content that tells these difficult stories, then you're part of the problem. You're letting these stories disappear into silence. August 6, 2019. The day Sheikh Rashid Al-Mansour's world collapsed. It wasn't FBI-level investigation that exposed Liana's secret. It wasn't a private detective or sophisticated surveillance. It was something far more mundane and far more terrifying: routine security maintenance. Rashid had his IT staff regularly back up and check all devices in the household. Standard procedure for a man who controlled millions of dollars and needed to protect against corporate espionage. What he didn't expect was for that same security system to destroy his family. When the technician recovered data from Liana's old devices she thought had been wiped clean, everything came flooding out. Months of messages. Intimate photos. Detailed plans for leaving Dubai. And worst of all, conversations where Liana described her father as the warden of my prison. How do you think a man like Sheikh Rashid reacted to discovering his daughter's betrayal? The household staff later described that evening as the loudest they'd ever heard the mansion. Shouting echoed through marble halls. Doors slammed. Several servants were dismissed immediately for failing to protect the family's honor. But here's what made this discovery particularly dangerous: Rashid didn't just see this as teenage rebellion. In his world, this was a threat to everything he'd built. His daughter's relationship with Karim wasn't just inappropriate, it was a scandal that could destroy business relationships, political connections, and social standing that had taken decades to establish. Cultural honor in families like the Al-Mansurs isn't just about reputation. It's about power, money, and survival in a social system where respect equals opportunity and shame equals destruction. That night, Rashid made a decision that would set everything in motion. Liana had to disappear. Not killed, that would create different problems. But removed. Sent away. Maybe to a rehabilitation facility in another country. Maybe into an arranged marriage with a family that would keep her controlled. Maybe to a psychiatric institution where her mental instability could be treated away from public view. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't medieval times. This was 2019, in one of the world's most modern cities. And a teenage girl was about to be erased from her own life because she fell in love with the wrong person. Liana knew exactly what was happening. She'd heard whispers about other women in similar situations, daughters, wives, sisters who had disappointed powerful men and subsequently vanished from Dubai's social scene. Some were rumored to be living under different names in other countries. Others were never spoken of again. The restrictions around her tightened immediately. Her phone was confiscated. Her laptop was locked away. Staff were instructed to monitor her constantly. Even her movements within the mansion were limited. But Rashid made one crucial mistake: he underestimated his daughter's desperation. You see, when people feel like they have nothing left to lose, they become capable of things that would have been unthinkable just days before. Liana wasn't just facing punishment, she was facing the complete erasure of her identity, her future, her very existence as an independent human being. And here's where I need to pause and ask you something. Are you someone who turns away when stories get uncomfortable? Are you someone who stops watching when the reality becomes too harsh? Because if you are, then you're part of the reason these stories stay buried. Hit that subscribe button if you're ready to face difficult truths. Share this video if you believe others need to hear stories like this. Because what happened next in the Al-Mansur mansion should serve as a warning to families everywhere. The question isn't whether Liana would try to escape. The question is what she was willing to do to make that escape possible. August 14, 2019. 2:17 a.m. The Al-Mansur mansion was quiet except for the hum of air conditioning and the soft footsteps of overnight security making their rounds. Sheikh Rashid slept in his master suite, probably dreaming about the arrangements he was finalizing to send his daughter away forever. He never woke up. What happened in those dark hours wasn't a crime of passion, it was a calculated act of desperation by a teenage girl who saw only two choices: submit to disappearing forever, or make sure her father could never make her disappear. For 3 days, Liana had been studying the mansion's security patterns. She knew which cameras had blind spots. She knew when the guards changed shifts. She knew her father's routine better than anyone, including which nights he took sleeping medication to deal with the stress of managing his family crisis. From the kitchen, she had taken a ceremonial dagger that usually decorated the dining room. Beautiful, sharp, and deadly. When staff asked why she was polishing it, she claimed she was trying to stay busy, to show she was being obedient. They believed her because she was still, in their minds, just a harmless teenage girl. That was their fatal mistake. The security footage, what little survived, showed a shadow moving through the mansion's corridors with purpose. Someone who knew exactly where the cameras couldn't see, someone who had clearly planned this route carefully. What happened inside Sheikh Rashid's bedroom took less than 5 minutes. Forensic evidence would later suggest that Rashid woke up during the attack. There were signs of a struggle, defensive wounds on his hands, indication that he tried to call for help. But Liana had disabled the room's communication system hours earlier, claiming she was helping with maintenance when staff asked. The official reports were brief and heavily censored, but medical examiners counted 11 stab wounds. 11 separate moments where a 17-year-old girl chose to drive a blade into her father's body rather than accept the life he had planned for her. By dawn, when household staff discovered the scene, Liana was sitting calmly in the garden, still wearing her blood-stained nightgown, waiting. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She didn't even try to clean up the evidence. When the first security guard found her, he asked what happened. Her response, according to police reports, was chilling in its simplicity: "I made sure he can't send me away now." The immediate aftermath was chaos. Sheikh Rashid Al Mansour, a man connected to some of Dubai's most powerful families, was dead, killed by his own daughter. This wasn't just murder, this was a scandal that threatened to expose the dark side of Dubai's elite family structures. Within hours, calls were made to the highest levels of Dubai's government. Not to investigate the crime, that was obvious, but to control the story. Think about this: how often do you hear about crimes involving Dubai's wealthiest families? Almost never. Because money doesn't just buy privacy, it buys silence. The official story became an incident at a private residence. Local newspapers ran brief mentions that were quickly buried. International outlets received no information at all. Even the police reports were classified at levels typically reserved for national security issues. But here's what you need to understand about this case: Liana Al Mansour didn't just kill her father. She destroyed the illusion that money and power can control everything. She proved that even the most carefully constructed systems of control can be shattered by someone with nothing left to lose. And what happened to her? That's where the story gets even more disturbing. Liana was never officially charged with any crime. She was never put on trial. She was never even publicly arrested. Instead, she simply disappeared. Some say she was moved to a private psychiatric facility outside the UAE. Others believe she was quietly executed and her body disposed of to maintain the family's honor. But before we talk about what this story teaches us, I need to ask you something: why aren't you sharing this video? Why aren't you helping these buried stories reach more people? Because if you're not part of spreading the truth, you're part of maintaining the silence that lets these tragedies happen over and over again. Hit that share button. Tell people about Liana Al Mansour. Make sure her story doesn't disappear into the darkness like she did. Today, 5 years later, the Al Mansour family name still carries weight in Dubai's business circles. Sheikh Rashid's business empire was quietly divided among his surviving children. The mansion where he died was sold to a private buyer who demolished it and built something new. But the lessons from that bloody night in August 2019 echo far beyond Dubai's elite circles. First, extreme control breeds extreme rebellion. When you try to completely dominate another person's life, you don't create obedience, you create desperation. And desperate people are capable of anything. Second, secrets in families become weapons. Rashid's discovery of his daughter's relationship wasn't just information, it became ammunition in a war between tradition and freedom that ended in tragedy. Third, power without empathy destroys relationships. Sheikh Rashid had the power to control his daughter's life, but he never developed the empathy to understand her needs, her dreams, or her breaking point. The most chilling lesson? Even the most powerful people in the world can be vulnerable to those closest to them. Rashid surrounded himself with security guards, surveillance systems, and loyal staff. But none of that protected him from the person sleeping down the hall. Do you have teenagers in your life who seem to be pulling away? Do you know families where control has replaced communication? Are you seeing warning signs that someone feels trapped with no way out? Because here's what I need you to understand: this story isn't really about Dubai or wealthy families or cultural traditions. It's about what happens when control becomes more important than connection, when fear becomes more powerful than love, and when families choose silence over difficult conversations. If this video has made you think differently about family dynamics, hit that like button. If you believe more people need to hear stories like this, share it with someone who needs to see it. And if you're ready to dive deeper into the cases that powerful people don't want you to know about, subscribe to Whispered Crimes. Because Liana Al-Mansour's story should never be forgotten, and neither should the lessons it teaches about the deadly price of absolute control. What other buried stories should we uncover next? Tell me in the comments below.